Um, Welcome to this webinar. I realise that I'm talking to a very diverse range of people, so I apologise if I'm speaking to people who know a lot about this, and those who don't, I hope you enjoy it and I hope you learn a lot from it. So the webinar is about introducing a reading scheme into a second language learning environment. So about me, I've been teaching for over 20 years. 18 of those have been overseas. Been a head teacher for 10 years. So I've taught in Kenya, Thailand, China, Hong Kong, and then back to Thailand again. I've designed and built new schools all over. And I've integrated Big Cat as a scheme into 3 of those schools. But I'm also a COBIS peer accreditor, a Penta and ISI inspector. So looking at quality assurance of schools, looking at the quality of reading provision, reading progress is a massive part of my passion and my job. That first word, passion, I'm about to talk to you about. This is very early days of my library that I designed at Wellington. I wanted to make reading the central focal point of the school. I wanted to make reading so important that everybody wanted to go there first, because everything disseminates from reading. Reading is the core of all our learning, and it must be centric. It must be central to everything we do. So my library design was very important to me, and it was one of the first things that I did when I went to design the school. The second one, this is the early years learning studio, we called it. So to the left and to the right are the classrooms, but to the center, there's a learning studio, and these are little reading dens where early years children can pop out, grab a book, and go into their little wigwam and read a book. I needed reading to be fun, to be personalized, to be central to the child. Even in the early years, it's so important to promote reading. Here is one of my favorite things. It's the slide that goes from the second floor of the library to the first floor of the library. And again, it's about emphasizing that reading is fun, that children could pick a book from upstairs, slide down to downstairs, to make sure that they understood that reading isn't about, shh, you're in the library, shh, stop it. It's about making sure that children understood the passion and the liveliness of reading, but you're immersed in worlds. And so a slide is perfect. These are the stairs that go between the bottom floor and the upper floor, and you can see we've labeled them with all different titles of books so that the children can be immersed in books. And you can see that those 2 children are quite happy reading their books on there. There is an auditorium where the children all sit and they're immersed in books. And just if you look to the right, you can see, and ahead of you there, it's a very grainy picture, unfortunately, but there are seats within the bookshelves. I wanted children to be immersed in books. I wanted children to be surrounded by books. I wanted children to feel that books were so central to everything we do. And so underneath that auditorium, there is a reading cave. And just there on the right, you can see the little cushions. So they pick a cushion, and on top of the cushions are a head torch, and they disappear into the reading cave with a head torch on, and they read a book with the fairy lights on in the dark. But it's reminiscent of when you were a child and you wanted to disappear under your blankets and read a book if you were passionate about it. I remember as a child taking a book, and when my mum and dad said lights out, I hid under the covers or I went under the bed so that I could carry on reading. You have to be passionate about reading. And so this is just a way to try and keep children passionate and keep children excited and influenced by reading. Here is an example. So this is an old sister school of mine. And this is a second language learner, okay? This is what we have to remember. So,
great readers make great writers, whilst great writers make great communicators, and great communicators make great persuaders. And you know what great persuaders make? They make good societies, and that's what this world needs. I think that it's totally crazy that all anyone ever talks about is games, TV shows, WhatsApp, Instagram, Bitmoji. I don't even know what that is. My brother just told me about it. WeChat, Kiki, Saraha, and I could go on forever. Studies have shown that some kids these days even spend 6.5 hours on a screen a day. I think we should draw attention to this problem. However, not reading can even result in making your brain less active or engaged. Just over the past year, I've enjoyed reading Winnetou by Carl May, the Harry Potter series with 8 books, Roald Dahl series with 12 books, and the Unwanted series with 7 books, and many single books in between. Some I've liked less, some I've liked more, but they all took me for such an adventure. Ask my family members. I'm a truly unhappy child when I don't have a good book to read right next to me. I love reading in places like my bed, on the move while walking, in the toilet, in queues, in vehicles, but more importantly, at home. I hide behind various corners of my house so nobody can find me and make me do anything else. Once I even hid behind a flower pot and pretended to be the flower, not moving at all. Nobody could find me for ages. It was hilarious. I read everywhere. So, for all of you skeptical people out there, let me tell you, when you have a good book to keep you company, there is nothing better in the universe. It takes you to places where you can't go, and lets you meet people you can't meet. Reading is love in action. And the positives are endless. Like, I usually never have to study for spelling tests, and it makes my vocabulary so good that it easily impresses any grown-up. Sometimes, the first thing I know is I've just had a short conversation with the grown-up, and the next thing I know is there's a room full of adults talking about me. I can't imagine my life without a book. What I'm comparing is the lost art of reading, writing, communicating, and persuading to some of the great societal ills of the text message, the tweet, and the snap. While these wonders of modern technology have their place, we, the young generation, have to hold on to reading. It's the key to our kingdom. So go out there, find a good book, not just any book. The best are the ones recommended by another.
So there you heard a very passionate young man who was only, I think he was year 4 at the time, telling you about reading. And to hear him conversing in that way, to hear him talking with such passion and such vocabulary, shows you the benefits of someone who reads. And it's very difficult in this age, as he points out, with modern technology, with iPads, trying to get children off YouTube and trying to get children out of that system and putting them back into a book is very difficult, which is why guided reading is so important. Now, guided reading, the cyclical cycle there, I'm not going to talk through it, but basically it's, you take a guided reading session, you design it, it's in groups, so it's individual to, it could be up to 2 to 6 members of a group. But before you do that, you have prior discussion with the children about the book. So you target the book at the children within the group. Then when the group come together, you analyze their reading. I don't know why it's doing that. You analyze their reading, and you talk to them about the book as you're reading. So each child reads a section of the book as you go around the group, but they're not anxious about it because it's at their level. You've already picked the right book for their level that they can read it and access it. So then you can discuss it and they feel confident about discussing it. Then you let them independently read again, go around the book, and then afterwards you read again. But once you've done that, as a teacher, you have conducted an analyzing reading record. So you have already determined how they've accessed the text, how they've understood the text, how they've answered the questions. Then after the session, you determine the next learning focus. So, what they need to gain from the next bit. And so you then select either the next section of the book, you carry on reading it, or you select another text that matches the focus of your learning. And then finally, you plan for your next steps, which again gives you assessment access points. And that's the cycle of guided reading. But the main goal of guided reading is to help students use strategies for them to read independently. It's trying to get them from lower level reading to independent learning, like that young man there, which is very, very difficult to do if you just let them sit in a classroom and read a book. It's about supporting them and scaffolding them through that process to make sure that they understand the journey. So guided reading doesn't just support the emergent readers, it supports all readers. It supports all needs in the class. So you can aim your text at every single level of learner in that class. It can be fluent readers, so you could read really high level text and discuss it and break it down what the author's intentions were, or you could do it with low level learners and really discuss about key vocabulary, what their meaning is. You can discuss sentence structure. You can really pull apart reading and make sure that the children understand everything about that text. It's about guiding them through the journey of reading and making them understand the love of reading. Unfortunately, and I guess I'm sharing this with a lot of other teachers, we all know children that can read and sight read any word given to them, but their inference skills are minimal. They can't understand the text, they can't answer questions about the text, they can't understand phrases that are in the text, they don't understand the author's intentions. Guided reading is about making sure that we get a full and incorporated understanding of everything that child is taking in, to make sure they have a love of reading, because otherwise reading becomes a chore and they'd rather go to the iPad. Whereas now we're trying to instill a love of reading and a passion of reading. So guided reading is not just something that's popped out of the UK. It's based on Vygotsky as well as Brunel, but it's based on the issue that guided reading guides children through the process to consolidate everything you want them to do, whether it be reading strategies, whether it be inference skills, whether it be key vocabulary. Vygotsky was particularly interested in the way that reading is continued to adults, because a lot of children got to through school age and stopped reading. They didn't need it for their job, they stopped reading. And he was particularly interested in the fact that why wasn't this happening? Why weren't children carrying this through? And he went on to say a lot of things about, adults who carried on reading were instilled with a love of reading by being taught it properly. They weren't left to independently read on their own, so they got bored or anxious. They were supported and they were pushed and they were nurtured through the process. So on the right there, that's the table, the zone of proximal development. Now, I don't call it that. I call it the optimal zone. So on the left there, you've got where independent readers or fragile readers are anxious about it, and they're left to read. They don't really feel confident, so they don't read a lot. On the right hand side, you've got where the learner can actually read, but he's not being supported, so there's boredom. So they just read and they don't absorb anything. So instead, what Vygotsky came up with was the zone of proximal development, which is where you have the optimal learning, where there's no anxiousness, there's no boredom, but it's scaffolded to support the learner through knowing more. You get the best out of a text. This is where teachers and students work together, where you as a teacher, you know the levels of the children, and you can take that in and you can take them forward, knowing where their levels are and knowing how to move them forward. You know individually, with small group size, you know individually where that child is lacking, and you can move them forward with the right questioning, with the right preparation. You can do things like preloading vocabulary to make sure that they're ready so they don't stumble over any text and feel anxious. You can actually extend them by putting in questions for the upper ability children and saying, well, when this comes up in a text, what do you think that means? So you can instill in them some sort of inquiry-based learning as well. So it's a case of not only scaffolding learning, but also preparing them for future learning. So here's a teacher with a large text in front of a class. She's only got it on bits of paper, unfortunately, but the guided reading helps students throughout reading because it helps them decode in the younger years, and it helps them construct meaning. So by showing them what the author is intending or asking the right questions at the right times, it makes sure that students read, talk, and think their way through a text. So they're not just they're not just reading it, you're asking questions and constantly making them inference to the text and making them understand that this is why the author did it. This is why the author made this picture. This is why the author's put that word in bold. This is why the author has used that synonym. And you can reflect back to grammar and make sure that the children constantly are surrounded by grammar, by the English language, and I'll come to that in a bit. And here are some examples of the books that are in schools. The Guidance of Scaffolding has been described as a metaphor taken from the building industry, which scaffolding is. It's about structuring to a higher point, and that's exactly what we're doing. So you take the child from the bottom and you scaffold up to the top. That's, you know, that's the idea of it, that we want the children to get a higher understanding, a higher intelligence of the books that we're reading. When a teacher knows and plans around a reading lesson, rather than letting the children read independently, when a teacher scaffolds their own planning around a reading lesson, knows what their targets are to hit, whether it be grammar, whether it be sentence structure, whether it be inference skills, whether it be key vocabulary, it ensures that the children get the most out of that reading lesson, rather than sitting in Vygotsky's proximal development in anxiety or in boredom. It ensures that the children get the maximum amount of reading fluency out of the lesson. Now, you can also use guided reading to front load, as I said, new vocabulary. So instead of coming to a new word that children don't know and having to stop and break the flow of reading and explain what the word is, you can do that beforehand so that all the children know the key vocabulary for that particular section of text, and say, right, this is a word that we're going to come up against today, and it means this, and they can research it. They can use their own research skills and go to a dictionary and find the word, etc. But it means that the flow of reading is not interrupted. It means that the children feel confident. They don't go back into the left-hand side of the proximal development grid of being anxious because they don't know what a word means, or being able to sound it out but not being able to understand what it means. So basically, you can focus on different parts. In the early years, you can focus on decoding. You can focus on teaching fluency, or you can literally focus on sentence structure, comprehension. You can set your questions to anything you want, but it's about targeting your pupils. It's about being individualized, personalized learning to those children in that group for their reading levels, make them feel confident, not anxious, not bored, but driven and passionate about reading. And that will instill the lifelong love of reading. So why, more reasons to why we want guided reading is that when children are given a chance to discuss it, when children are given a chance to put down the books for 5 minutes and let's discuss what we've read, what do you think happened? What do you think the author meant? What do you think about this? They build up their own confidence in understanding and discussing it. And then you're giving them presentation skills. So you're actually giving them the skill to talk about the knowledge that they've just taken on. You have the chance for a child not only to inherit information, but also discuss with confidence what their thoughts are. And in a confident environment, in a very settled environment where they don't feel threatened, they don't feel anxious, they can just say what they think, and their peers will support them. So it's not a case of feeling anxious about reading. It's about them being able to discuss with confidence what they thought the author's intentions were. As the guided reading system progresses, the teacher withdraws the support as they get more independent, but you still carry on the guided reading because the children then become independent learners. And then the children still discuss it because then it gives them that discussion skill at the end of their reading session. But instead of the teacher scaffolding it and guiding them through it, the teacher scaffolds how the text goes, but not what the discussion is, not what the questions are going to be. It comes from the children. So as you can see, as you go through a primary school, for instance, as the children become more independent, they become more confident to talk about the book, which children who are left to independently read, when they can read, are not, because their inference skills haven't been that developed. As it says at the bottom, it's a self-fueling system. It's a practice that promotes and opportunities for development of self-extended systems, because as you grow, the children then are quite happy to go and discuss books, which, you know, things like book clubs and things revolve around. But if children don't have the confidence to speak about a book or the inference to understand a book, those sort of things will never happen. So it's a case of instilling the confidence to speak about the book, to speak about what they've understood about the book, to speak about their comprehension of the book confidently, to move it forward. So the key to guided reading is finding the right book. You need to find the right book for the levels of your children. So, and as I said before, it could be a group of 2, it could be a group of 6, maybe 7, 8, but you don't want to bulk the children in a too big a group to say, well, you're all the same level, because children are never the same level of reading. Some might have better inference skills, some might better have sight vocabulary, some might better have decoding skills, but you need to get the right group size and then find the right book. Once you've got the book that meets the needs, you need to make sure that you have the right questions to ask. You need to make sure that you have everything at your armory to prepare you for that lesson. Now, as it says there, some schemes support phonic development. They're very repetitive, they build on sight words. There is good reading schemes that combine a lot of elements, but a good reading scheme not only highlights key vocabulary, is not only repetitive when it comes to phonics, but it also builds. Now, there are certain reading schemes that don't do that. Certain reading schemes are only, let's say, fiction based, with key characters that are repetitive. In a good reading scheme, you have a mix of fiction and non-fiction, and you have the option to pick a text for those children, particularly boys, without being sexist, but young boys are not driven by fictional text. Young boys are driven by non-fiction text. Now, I've come up against problems in Beijing and in Hong Kong, where certain groups of boys were falling behind in reading. And the reason for that was that there was not a text that inspired them. There was not a text that excited them. There was not a text that they wanted to read. Getting the right reading scheme where you can access a text that you know the children will love, you know the children will be inspired by, you know that the children will be excited to want to read more, is key. Because on Vygotsky's scale, if you don't, you put them into the boredom side. If you pick one that's too hard, you put them into the anxiety side. So having the access to a huge range of text is vital. And without being funny, it's hugely, hugely important to make sure that you get the right scheme that gives you access to all of those, to make sure that your readers succeed. Because if you're not, you will not turn those into lifelong readers. There at the bottom, there's a quote that says, quality literature is highly motivating to both students and teachers. Students prefer to learn with these texts, and given the opportunity, will choose these texts over traditional readers, which is exactly what I had when I was at school, but that's another matter. So there are 3 cues that teachers can use in guided reading. So you've got the graphophonic, which is sounding out words, sight words, and recognition. So particularly useful for the early years and the early readers. And that's where you get the repetition and the bold words rather than the index words, but to try and make sure that they recognize and understand key words. Then you've got the semantic, which is the meaning of words and recognizing new vocabulary, building their vocabulary range, just like that young man did in that video, building on their ability to verbalize exactly what they want to say, but with a huge range of vocabulary rather than simple vocabulary. And there's the syntactic, and I call it quite simply the music of English. It's about how sentences are structured. It's about the use of synonyms and adverbs and adjectives. It's about how you can be poetic with English. Now, obviously, that's a little bit further down the line, but these 3 cues are what you need to structure your planning for a guided lesson around, to make sure that with your learners, you've got the graphophonic thought about, so that you know that the recognition of those words. So as you're running your running record of how the children are reading and what they've struggled with, you can see that they haven't got high frequency words down to a key, or that they've got them all down to a key. So you can tick that off your assessment base. That you've planned for your semantic, so that they understand and they can recognize what a keyword is, you know, what it means. So when they come up against a word, that they can say, oh, I understand what that means. It means this, so that they can then use that in their own vocabulary. And you've concentrated on focusing on what the author used in the text, how they've used the music of English. Why did they do that? Why do you think they used that word? Why do you think they've used a comma there? Why do you think they've used that particular structure of language? And it gives the children a better understanding of why authors do it. Because of course they're a higher level of English writer than the children are. So it gives them an idea of what the goal setting is. So there are two approaches to introducing a new reading scheme, and this is from personal experience and not from made up. There's gradual integration, which I've done before, which is using a new scheme alongside existing schemes. Now that can be for a number of reasons. So it could be for if you go to if you're in an established school where they've got lots and lots of reading schemes, so you bring in a new scheme, they don't want to ditch all their resources, because at the end of the day, you know, these resources have been there, the children are familiar with them, they don't want to get rid of them. But you have to bring a new scheme in, but you need to understand how it tallies with the older schemes. So you can have things like book banding, where someone like the English coordinator will have to correlate what this level of book in this scheme means to this level of book in this scheme. But it works that way. It can work that way, that then the children have a range of books. The benefits of this is obviously cost, because you don't have to throw the books away. If you were to do so, teachers would find it difficult, because trying to keep in tally with many different schemes and trying to record them is very difficult. Whereas when I introduce a new scheme, I introduce them on their own, but I'll come to that in a minute. So the scheme that I introduced into these three schools, the British School of Beijing, the reason I did it there was we need an injection of interest. The boys had failed, or were plateauing for a while. Our SAT scores, because it was all about inference, the children couldn't infer. And I say SAT is an assessment test that's taken at the end of certain year groups. And a level 4 is kind of like the expected attainment at the end of a particular year group. Now we had lots of boys and girls that could read very fluently, but unfortunately, when it comes to writing the assessment relies on them inferring and comprehending the information, and they couldn't make that transition. So what we did is we brought in a new scheme. We looked at comprehension, we looked at inference skills, and we raised it from 67% to 98%. Then in Hong Kong, I had another chance. And so this time I just brought it in from the beginning. There was 100% adoption from staff. There was a new energy and buzz in the children. The children loved the new books because it was all new. They loved the layout. They loved the fact that the teachers had such interest in it. We had an ISI as an inspection, an international inspection, a bit like Ofsted in the UK. The school was given outstanding in all areas, and reading was reported as a strength of the school. Then when I went to Bangkok, did the same again. First thing I did was call Big Cat and say, I need the whole set in. And that includes the phonics books, that includes the early years books, all the readers, all through. And once again, children were absolutely delighted with it. Children absolutely loved it. And again, it was praised by a COBIS Patrons Accreditation Inspection as being a strength of the school. And they were the first school in the world to achieve Patrons Accreditation in the first year of operation. So the reason that I chose Big Cat was it's a whole school reading program, and it goes from literally the very, very beginning, books with no words, all the way up to complete fluency. Some of the titles you'll see there, you've got the Ice Climber, which is a non-fiction book, perfect for year 5 boys. You've got Plague of Fire, which is history related, so you can link it to your topic. You've got Wow Cow, the young learners. You've just got so much at your fingertips to make sure that you can aim your guided reading at the right levels. It encourages a lifelong of reading because the children can pick the genre, the children can pick the style that they like, and they can become in love with it. And as soon as they become in love with one style, it means they're open to other styles. There's gentle progression. Some reading schemes are a huge jump. I mean, I remember being at school and reading one level of book I'm talking when I was 8, jumping from one level to another and feeling completely anxious that I couldn't read the words. And in those days, I had to go to the teacher's desk and read to the teacher. And I knew that I'd do in front of the class that I would not be able to read those words. So it put me on the left-hand scale of Vygotsky. Whereas Big Cat is such a gentle progression. There's no big leaps. There's no huge jump between the sections or between the levels or bands that the children will feel apprehensive about it. The children would feel, challenged. The way that they're set out, it develops their reading skills. And as I said before, with the different titles we've got on the screen there's something for everybody. It doesn't matter about their gender, age. It doesn't matter about their culture. There's something for everybody. And the nice thing for teachers is there's so many titles that fit in with historical subjects that fit in with your curriculum. So, for instance, there's famous figures. You've got the Fire of London. There's one on the Plague. There's all sorts. The main reason that I chose Big Cat is because instead of telling teachers to guided read with a guided reading scheme, Big Cat guides the teachers through it. So at the back of each book or within the teachers sections, you've got a completely supportive section which takes them through how to discuss it, what questions to ask, and what responses to do. And there's an example there. This is a non-fiction book, which I love, because for the boys that were struggling, you've got all these keywords highlighted, and it's, look at the words. Most boats only have one hull, but this has 3 to make it go faster. I mean, the boys loved it. But the way it's set out, the key vocabulary is there. Now, if you haven't preloaded the vocabulary, this is an opportunity for you to discuss it. What is the stern? Where do you think it is? Is it the bow or the stern? Where's the front? Where's the back? What do you think? Oh, well, hang on. There's a boat saying the bow is at the front. So where do you think the stern is? It gives you a discussion point. Here's another section of, well, that's a perfect example. Look at it. Ideas for reading. Learning objectives are all there. Getting started. How to go through the book, and then reading and responding. So it's prompt and praise use of syntax. So everything is there for a teacher. Everything is there to ensure that guided reading session gets the most out of the book. So it's not just about the teacher getting the most out of the book. It's about the book making sure that you get the best out of the book. It's absolutely bulletproof. And when you're establishing a new school, as I was, I needed that confidence that the teachers would get the most out of the resource that I'd paid money for. That the children got the most out of the reading. The children got the most out of those sessions to make the maximum progress possible. Here's one at the top end of the school. So you've got more reading objectives, and you've got curriculum links that you could share the book with. Communication and language objectives, high frequency words, building a context for reading. It takes the reading to a greater depth. So it makes sure that the teachers know how to not only read the book with the children, but make the most and develop the children to the higher levels so they get the best inference skills, the best reading fluency that they can. I mean, it's very simple. And these objectives, because they're also electronic with Big Cat, teachers can just copy and paste and put them into their own readings, into their own planning. So the planning for guided reading is made much simpler, as well as the delivery of guided reading, which you as a teacher would find easier, and I as a head would feel much more happy about that. I'm not putting extra burden on you. It just makes the whole process simpler for the best outcome of the children. And then here we've got one of the higher ends of reading proficiency. And again, the teacher linking the learning to their other experiences. So talking about what happens outside of school, what happens inside of school, and making sure that, down at the bottom there it says use Google Earth. to explore reefs in more detail. So it's linking it to real life experiences, which, as we all know as teachers, leads to consolidation of learning. Actually, instead of just reading about something and dispersing with it, linking it to real life or something that they could actually recall in a conversation about a real reef or about a real animal, will actually consolidate that learning. When we get to the top of the school, you're talking about some real complex texts. So you've got Frankenstein here, which is obviously a very complex text. In a more advanced text, it talks about inference skills, talks about author's intentions, as you can see on the right. And as Charlene has mentioned, these slides will be available to you on a video afterwards. So you can make all the notes you want from there. But to make sure that you get the most out of a very complex text, to make sure you get the most out of a very detailed text where the author's intentions are quite critical to your understanding of the text, it's very important that the teachers know what to discuss, where to discuss it, where to pause, and where the children to discuss what they think, where the children can sit down, stop for a minute, stop for a minute and discuss what they think the author meant by that, what they think Frankenstein is feeling at the moment, or what they think Frankenstein's creator was trying to do at that point. It's, you know, narrator's ambition relate to the rest of the story. You know, it's hugely detailed, and the progression of skills throughout the books gives the teacher confidence to feel like they are delivering a proper guided reading session, rather than we're all just going to sit and read for 30 minutes and then we'll just leave. What I also liked about Big Cat was you can see there's such a diverse range of books, and how it takes the children through a gradual journey all the way to the end. You've got them broken down here, you've got them broken into phonics, you've got them broken down into, because the early years have a phonics book, and then there's guided readers there. There's also a digital option, which some schools can sign up to, so that you can send them home digitally if you have a portal, or like Firefly, etc., so that you could send a digital book home to read with the parents. Colin's early years, you can see here that they have they're short books. They've no words to start with. It's all about discussing the story with the child. What do they think is happening in the story? It's about building that storytelling ability, you know, being able to verbalize what they think is happening in the story. They go through, as they get into the early years, they take that repetitive pattern, which consolidates all the words that they've read, including the keywords, which you want to do. And as you go through from yellow to lime, the books start to get gradually harder. And we start to introduce things like glossaries and indexes. The illustrations, certainly in the non-fiction books, the pictures become more annotated to make sure that the children are drawn to the pictures and to the important parts of the picture. And as you can see, when you get to lime, you get to complex things like subordinate clauses and figurative language, which again is pointed out to the teachers to ask questions about and draw relevance to at the discussion points, which could be the beginning, the middle, or the end. And then right at the top end, you're looking at quite complex texts where you're looking for the children to be more independent. You're actually looking for the children to be independently reading and then discussing with you afterwards, rather than you guiding them through it. So these are quite complex texts, but it's, again, as you can see there, they're supportive of the curriculum. They're supportive of the learning that's happening in the classroom at the time. A lot of cross-curricular topics, and the poetry and the plays are also figure in a lot of the English national curriculum. What you also get with it is the Guided Reading Handbook, which is a teacher's tool, which for me as a head to give to a teacher means that I've given you the Bible. You now have the complete handbook of how to teach it, how to assess it, how to monitor the progress, and how to tell me how my readers are doing in the school. I can now effectively monitor all the reading levels within the school because you've got this handbook. It's focused on each book, so each level is focused, as you can see here, that they've got two levels there. You've got copper and topaz, but they focus on each different book, and they focus on the skills, and they give the teacher a handbook to be able to assess each child with each skill. It's also got booster sessions for any child that's struggling, and it gives you ideas of how to do those booster sessions. And it's also got downloadable follow-up resource sheets that you could send home or you could do within your class in a guided reading session or a guided writing session. There are also extension activities to extend the higher ability learners. So it's not just the weaker readers that get supported, it's also got the extension ability, the extension activities for the higher end learners. So in summation, guided reading, it basically is to lead the children forward with intention and precision. So it's to pinpoint their actual needs, it's to pinpoint where the children are in their reading ability and reading fluency and move them forward to the next level. Slowly but surely, using the right book, using the right tools and the right questions and the right discussion, those children will move through slowly with intention and precision. So the children with guided reading get better comprehension because they're able to understand, because they're able to discuss, they're able to understand the text. They don't comprehend in silent reading because they normally just read through, but they don't comprehend what they're reading. This ensures that the children understand what they're reading. It ensures that you as a teacher understand that they understand what they're reading. Children being able to read aloud makes them more a proficient reader, rather than sitting down and reading quietly to themselves and becoming timid or becoming shy. Reading aloud should be something you're proud of. And if they are shy, you can give them feedback or individual reading before they read aloud to you or in front of the class. This is the big one for me. It allows for differentiated instruction because the teacher picks the book for a certain level in a group and you pick the group size. So your group could be 6 children, it could be 2 children, it could be 1 child, it could be 3. But because you're picking the amount of children that are at that level and the book to suit their level, those children are getting completely personalized, differentiated learning. And that to me is essential when trying to teach reading, because you meet their individual needs and make sure you move them forward one by one. I wish I wouldn't do that. It's more enjoyable because the children get to discuss it. The children are not feeling anxious because they're reading one-to-one with you. They're in a group. They're motivated. They feel supported. I mean, I think we all remember being at school and getting told off and wanting someone else to be told off with you so that you could both go to the teacher's desk to be told off, because doing it together feels more supportive. So doing it in a group feels more supportive and less anxiety is involved in it. So it's more enjoyable for the children. They feel less anxiety and they go more to that zone of proximal development. You can address weaknesses. If you let them read alone, you don't know what the weaknesses are. If you hear them read and you ask the questions, you know exactly where their weaknesses are. You can listen to them carefully. You can pick up on the words they don't know. You can pick up on their inference skills. You can pick up on their comprehension. You can pick up where they're skipping commas, etc., and not understanding they have to pause. So you can literally individually plan for the next reading lesson for a child. And also you can help, you can assess both fluency and comprehension. You can easily develop a plan to help teachers read, to help readers in specific areas they struggle with, which is what we were talking about in the cycle, where you plan, you read, you question, then you do your reading record, and then you plan again, and then you go back to the start. You can intentionally teach concepts about print. So you can talk to them about the concepts you can target within your planning and in your delivery actual things you want to do. So you can target punctuation, you can target grammar, you can identify key words, you can identify, in the early years you can identify key letters through repetition. What's the key letter? In middle years you can talk about alliteration, you can talk about all sorts, but you can target it to a particular text that has these features for you to teach. And this is the big thing for me. You can help readers talk about text. So it gives you a chance for the children to discuss. So instead of just reading alone and absorbing that language, they can talk about it. They can talk about if they enjoyed it, they didn't enjoy it, what the author's intentions were, what the character was doing. You can talk about everything. And the children don't often get an opportunity to talk about the text they're reading. And this is a great way of developing communication skills and developing oral efficiency. Now I'm going to hand back to Charlene because it's that's the end of my presentation. So thank you very much.